I'm Don Carlton from the University of Texas at Austin. This is July the 24th, the year 2000. This is an interview with John Forsythe. We're in Los Olivos, California. Thank you. Good afternoon, John. Thank you for joining us for this interview. I want to ask you a few background questions to get things going here. What was your name at birth?
John Lincoln Freund, Freund.
Did you have any nicknames growing up?
None that I could tell you about.
Oh, okay. When were you born? What's your birthday?
January 29th, 1918.
Where were you born?
In Penns Grove, New Jersey. Right at the tip end of New Jersey, right where the Chesapeake Bay meets the river.
What was your father's name?
My father's name was Jeremiah.
And what did he do?
Well, he was with the DuPont Company, and I happened to be around at the beginning of that relationship between him and the DuPont Company. And then we moved to New York, and he was in Wall Street. He was a broker in Wall Street.
What was your mother's name?
Blanche.
And what did she do?
She was a housewife and a good mother and a pretty lady.
Did you have sisters and brothers, or?
One sister, one brother.
And what were their names?
My brother's name was Don, D-O-N. My sister's name was Charlotte.
Where did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in southern New Jersey and in New York.
How was your family affected by the Great Depression?
Well, that's an interesting question. The thing that I remember most about the Depression is the weight it took for people who labored in that period of time. My father, who was a man whose hands were quite soft, when you sit behind a desk and write things, you don't use your hands that much. During the Depression, he worked as a ditch digger, and he dug ditches in the cemetery as well, because things were that bad. But he never failed to use whatever skills he had to just keep going, and he was a remarkable man in that respect.
Tell me about your early influences. Did you listen to the radio, for example?
Well, when I was a boy, radio was there was no television around. Radio was the big entertainment medium. And we all listened to it, all listened to Roosevelt's speeches, even though my father was not very happy about Mr. Roosevelt. My father thought he was not the best president. I thought he was a wonderful president. But let me tell you that my father thought Warren Harding was a great president. So you can see the disparity that existed there.
Pretty rock-ribbed Republican.
When I read in school and discussed in classroom Warren Harding as president, I was amazed at what a bad president he was. Whereupon I told my father I said, "Who was your favorite president? Because you got a picture of Warren Harding on the wall." He said, "That's him. That's my favorite." And I said, "Well, Dad, I read it and I discussed in class that he was not a very good president. What do you have to say about that?" He said, "Poppycock. That's what it is, poppycock. He was a great president." And I said, "Why was he a great president?" He said, "Because he was presidential. And I said, okay, let's not discuss it anymore. So we didn't discuss it anymore.
Well, you were talking about the radio, talking about listening to the radio and Roosevelt speeches and so forth. Did you have any favorite shows, though, regular shows that you listened to?
Well, I, for one, loved Amos and Andy. I thought that was a great show. Beautifully done, perfectly written, and the subject matter was wonderful. And that was my favorite.
Did you go much to the movies?
Oh, yes. I went to see all the cowboy movies. I knew every cowboy by his middle name. I knew them all.
Do you have any favorite stars, movie stars?
Yes. Buck Jones was one of them. I don't know whether you remember Buck Jones or not, but he was Ken Maynard. A couple of those fellas were my favorites.
What about your hobbies? Did you have hobbies when you were growing up?
Well, my father had the most interesting hobby. He was a philatelist. Stamps were his life, and he really enjoyed collecting stamps. And I tried to get interested in stamps, but I couldn't. I was much more interested in sports and girls, in that order.
How did you rate as a student?
I was a pretty good student. Yes, I was the top in my class sometimes.
Any favorite subjects?
History, for one. I loved it.
Good.
American history. And I loved ancient history as well.
When did you become interested in acting?
By accident, really. What I did was, the guys that I went to college with, who were in the acting fraternity, were all very strange fellows. They walked funny and they talked funny and all. And here I was, a minor athlete, and I kind of looked down on them a little bit. And when they invited me to join their midst, I said, "Are you kidding? I'm afraid not. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not sure that I'm going to be an actor. I'm not sure that I'm cut out to be an actor." And they said, "Well, we think you're cut out to be an actor. You got a good voice and you're a nice-looking fella." I said, "I've heard that before. Come on now, fellas." So I didn't have anything to do with acting in school.
What did you want to be if before you wanted to be an actor, though, during this period?
Ball player.
Oh, somebody in sports?
Sports announcer. And I became a sports announcer. And I only became an actor because that's summertime occupation, being a baseball announcer. And I like to eat in the wintertime. And then the only way I could do it was be to become a radio actor or try to become a radio actor or an announcer of one kind or another.
During this period of time, they developed television. Do you remember the first time you ever saw television in the late 30s and early 40s? Does that memory stand out?
Well, I thought it was a strange little box. First of all, it was so tiny you could barely see it. You had to peer into it. And second of all, I was working at the time. I had just stopped being a radio actor and was working in television. I was among the early television actors. And I won a couple of awards as a television actor, which came as a great surprise to me because I didn't think I was that good an actor. But if you knew your lines and you managed somehow and if you were playing a part where you were shot and killed, if you didn't move and you stayed still during that period when you're supposed to be lying down, then you were a genius. Because the instinct was you were finished with that set, you ran across the set and you to another scene. So technically I was perfect. As an actor, less than perfect.
Well, talking about that early television, that the first one you ever saw, did you happen to go to the New York World's Fair?
Yes, I did.
Did you see the television they were demonstrating?
Yes,
there?
I
Do you
did.
remember that?
And it was a great invention.
What was your impression of it? Do you remember?
Well, I didn't think it was ever going to work.
Hmm.
I have a story to tell you about my mother. When I started to act in television, my mother, of course, was my biggest fan. And we had no television set. So she had to go down to a saloon on one of the streets and ask them if they'd turn off the wrestling match. Her son was going to be on the air. And there was some grumbling and everything. And a lot of strange things said. My mother was above it all. And lady that she was, she thanked them all, including the guys that were at the bar, Pretty soon they were watching the show, and they were caught up with it much more than they were at the boxing or whatever it was that they had to turn off, wrestling match or whatever it was. And my mother thanked them all personally, and they said, "Your son has got some talent." She said, "I know that. Thank you very much." And off she went.
What high school did you attend?
I attended Abraham Lincoln High School. That's all, just the one.
And then did you go on to college?
Yes. I got a part scholarship at North Carolina.
Oh, University of North Carolina?
Yes.
Chapel Hill?
Yes.
What did you study there?
English lit, mostly. That was my favorite. History was one of my minors, but English literature was my major.
And then after you left University of North Carolina, where did you go?
Went to work.
Went to work where?
Yes. As a radio actor and as a budding television actor.
And you had a little stint that you just mentioned earlier that I want to talk about with the Brooklyn Dodgers, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Tell us
that
about
was in
that.
between.
Well, tell us about that.
Well, I was a big Dodger fan, and Red Barber was my mentor in a way, because I had gotten a job doing the public address announcing at Ebbets Field for the Dodgers. And part of the occupation was, of course, reading the lineups and all the substitutions and changes and everything. But they were not doing well at the gate. They were doing poorly at the gate. So they used to have Babe Didrikson hitting 9 irons from home plate into a fireman's net out in center field. Jesse Owens racing a thoroughbred racehorse around the bases. And they wanted Red to do it, and he wouldn't do it. And he recommended me to do it because I was doing the lineups and things. And it was an exciting time for me because to have Jesse Owens racing a thoroughbred racehorse around the bases and beating the horse too was with a jockey on it, of course. It was a big feat. And we've had 30,000 people out there. So doing that, ad-libbing and describing the action various times was an important thing for me because it enabled me to develop some poise, which is highly necessary as an announcer. And I did. I can tell you a quick story about Jesse Owens, who was a lovely, lovely man. He's the one that won the four, if you remember, he won the four dash titles at the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. And he was the first black that had that opportunity. And it was not very happy, they were not very happy in Berlin at a black having that opportunity. So a couple of years later, when he came, we got him to race this thoroughbred racehorse around the bases. And sure enough, we did it 3 times. And every time we did it, he beat the horse. Finally, one day I said to him, Jesse, how do you do that? How can you keep beating that horse that way? I mean, he can fly. He said, yes, he can fly, but I can cut the corners, and he can't. And he said, and also, too, I have a little secret. Do you notice where the starter stands with his pistol, starter's pistol? I said, yeah, right next to the horse. He said, yeah. And when he pulls that trigger, the starter does, the horse and I start off. But you notice that the sound of that trigger, the horse jumps up a little bit in the air. Well, in that time that he's away, I'm 5 yards ahead. And he said, circling the bases, I had him beat by at least 5 yards all the way. I said, you scoundrel, you. You terrible man.
That's great. How long did you do that, the Brooklyn Dodgers thing?
About 2.5 years. Then I got so involved as an actor with the Actors Studio and
well, I was going to ask you, did you have any actual formal acting training?
No, I had none except with the Actors Studio. And as you may remember, they were the hot spot of theatrical learning at that point for a young actor.
How did you get involved with them?
Well, I was asked to, they had 2 groups. One was a tyro group, the beginning actors, and the other were actors like Marlon Brando and Monty Clift and Patricia Neal and people like that who were in the advanced group. And for some unaccountable reason, I always thought somebody made a mistake. I was put in the advanced group, and I was scared to death, too, because there they were, all those extraordinary actors, and there I was biting my nails. And it turned out to be a very rewarding time for me, because it gave me a foundation in acting. And although I never became a Brando or Montgomery Clift, I was capable enough.
What would you say you learned? What was the most important thing you learned at the Actors Studio? Anything in particular that stays with you now?
Well, concentration for one thing. A desire to explore and not do the hackneyed, trite things that young actors are forced to do. The kind of rebellion that the Actors Studio fomented, because it was a remarkable group of young actors and elderly actors as well. So I'd say that those 2 or 3 factors were key. And then to be in the presence of such talented people and observing their work, of course, was a big boon.
What was your first professional work? Was it in the radio, with radio soap operas?
Yes, that was my first, but that was before I tried to become a stage actor. And stage acting was a thing that didn't come easy to most people, and it didn't come easy to me. But in the presence of that group at the Actors Studio, they were kind enough to let me in and make me part of the group. I gloried in that, and I flourished too. And I never did become. I don't think to this day I'm a tremendous actor. I think I'm a workmanlike actor. I can do a lot of things, and I think my style is suitable and somewhat appealing. So I think I've been very, very fortunate.
Do you remember what your first stage role was, your first professional stage role?
Yes. My first one was, they had a theater group in New York which played for peanuts. You know, the actors got peanuts, and the producers were artists of great, you know, that took all the money and throw the actors a coin every now and then, seemingly. And I did well in a couple of plays.
I've got the Dick Whittington and his cat.
Oh no, that was a children's theater.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I drove a truck
Uh-huh.
and went around the country in a children's theater.
I see. And
Dick
then
Whittington and the cat was my show. You know, I played the sea captain, robust sea captain, and I've fattened myself out. It was not my best work.
how did you get involved in that one? That particular tour? That was a touring
Well,
show. Is that right?
I was determined to learn something about theater, and also too, what we did was we had two big trucks with gaily painted children's fables all over the outside, and we carried the scenery as well. So there were two other guys and me, and two or three women, young women actresses, and we put up the scenery, we carried the luggage, we did everything. We acted and drove a truck, and it was another experience in learning.
But then you were in something called Vicky and Yankee Point.
Those were two plays on Broadway, both directed by Jose Ferrer, and they were short-lived. But again, getting on Broadway was a big thing, and it's the beginning of something, you know. And I benefited from that immensely.
Well, about this time, I think, is when World War II broke out in terms of your
Mm-hmm.
where your career was at that point.
Yes.
How did the outbreak of the war affect your career and your life?
Well, again, I wanted to fly, and it was not possible, you know, because I had some kind of eye deficiency, and so I went into the service as a buck private, and subsequently became a sergeant as I went along. I never got into combat. What I was, since I had done some remedial speech work in college, I was put as part of a medical unit that worked with young pilots who had lost their power of speech in combat. and I would do some of the physicalization of they lost completely their ability to talk. And the psychiatrists, and that was a thing in itself, to be working with psychiatrists at the beginning of the outburst of energy that psychiatry brought to the world. So I worked in conjunction with the people, with the doctors, and with these pilots in their effort to learn to speak.
Where was this? Where
This was
you
at Pauling, New York, and down in Florida too, at Tampa Bay. So I never got out of the country.
How long were you in the service?
About 3 years.
So you were discharged after the war, at the end of the war.
Yes.
And then you went right back into acting?
Yes. I had a contract at that point with Warner Brothers, a small contract. I think I made $100 a week. That was considered a lot of money then. And I was in a couple of movies right after I got out of the service. One of them called Destination Tokyo, a picture about submarines. And I was mostly in pictures related to the war and playing soldier parts or sailor parts or whatever.
You were also, weren't you on the stage, in the stage show Winged Victory?
Yes, I was in Winged Victory for a while. In between entering the service and my work with the psychiatrists and everything in Pauling, New York.
This is why you were still in the service, is when
Yes.
you were in Winged Victory.
Yes.
Any memories about that stand out, about being in Winged Victory?
No, there was a very interesting group of people, all professional actors, and most of them quite good too. And one of my best friends, who was a director, was in that group, Martin Ritt, and he was a very good director. And we decided that in our spare time that what we would do, we would try to do some scenes and maybe even do a play. And we did something called Yellow Jack, Sidney Howard's play. Wonderful, wonderful play. And we did that on Broadway.
Well, let's stop right here. We're going to change tape in the camera.
Okay.